Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sports Car Market Scottsdale Insider Seminar here at Gooding & Company. I'm Donald Osborne, and I'll be the moderator for today, or the referee, as the case may be. And we'd like to thank you all for coming. First of all, we'd like to give a special thank you to the Sports Car Market staff who made all of this possible, of course, and greetings from Keith Martin, the absent publisher, Chester Allen, Jim Pickering, Tony Piff, Chad Tyson, Aaron Olson, Darren Frank, and Brian Baker. Now, big hand. You'll also see that as you came through the main lobby that the SCM booth is there, and it's got lots of copies of the magazine, the Concours Guide, the Price Guide, as well as copies of Keith's book, Strange But True Tales of Car Collecting. And I think some of them are, or most of them are autographed. Is that correct, Brian, that they're autographed? I think some are autographed by Carol Shelby, some are autographed by Juan Fangio. I think so you have to pick the right one to make sure that you get that. And of course, we want to thank our sponsors, and first and foremost is our host, Gooding & Company. And here to say a few words to us about what's going to happen in the next couple of days here is David Gooding.
Well, welcome. Good morning to everybody. Happy to see we organized great weather, and it promises to be a good couple days here at Scottsdale. How many people have not been to a Gooding & Company auction before? Okay, good. It's a nice balance. We've got some veterans and some newbies. We have 116 cars that we're going to be selling between Friday and Saturday. We have it's divided up pretty much equally between each day, and the sale begins at 11 o'clock. And I know that you'll all be talking about various issues here at the seminar, but we really encourage, we open the seminar up, we very much encourage open dialogue. We want you all to feel comfortable about looking at the cars. Feel free to ask us questions, speak amongst yourselves. A lot of people think that as used car dealers, we're trying to mask or hide something, and used car dealers are known to do that sometimes, I am told. But we very much believe in an open dialogue, and we're here to share the cars with you, and we also feel like we can learn a lot from our clients. So. Bounce stuff off of us. If you have questions, you're of course welcome to speak with yourselves, but also if you have specific questions, you can find one of the specialists out on the sales floor to show you a car, to answer any questions you have, and tell them something that you've discovered, and we all learn from it. And oftentimes we'll have people that'll come and tell us something about a car, and it's just a fun process for us to learn. Most of the cars that are $250,000 and below, an estimate of $250,000 and below, are without reserve. So that means that no matter what the high bid is, it will sell for without reserve. We have some cars that are in excess of $250,000 that are without reserve. There's the Alfa Romeo. I know you're a fan of Alfa, coach-built Alfas, but that's a great example.
No idea why you looked at me for that reason.
Yeah, the Alfa Romeo with a Buono body, a one-off Alfa, that is no reserve. We're estimating that at 1.3 to 1.6. So it's not just the cheaper cars that are without reserve, but quite a selection. About 50% of the cars are without reserve, and we have everything from a pre-war Duesenberg all the way up to the Ferraris, the Enzo and whatnot from the Tony Shoshani collection. I think that kind of covers everything. We're just, again, delighted to host you all here, and look forward to seeing the new people back at some of our future sales. Our next auction will be at Amelia Island in March. There we will be offering a significant group of cars from the Jerry Seinfeld collection, as well as many other wonderful cars. We've actually closed that sale out, and then the sale after that is Pebble Beach, which a lot of you West Coast people come to Pebble Beach. So Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate your patronage, your support, and your enthusiasm. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Don't leave quite yet. While you're here, I just want to ask one question, which I think that a lot of people out here would like to hear. Everyone wants to know, with the turmoil in the equities markets, where do you think people are looking this week? How will it affect the car market this week?
You know, it's always hard for me to predict, but in the past, when we've had dramatic swings in the market just before an auction at Pebble Beach in 2008, and there have been a few Pebble Beaches where literally the Friday before our Saturday and Sunday auctions, the market took a big dive, and it has been tumultuous that week. It really did not affect the car market. Now, I can't say that that's going to always be the case, but in the past, when there have been dramatic fluctuations in equities, there's a flight toward hard assets. People feel comfortable and confident in the stability of hard assets. So I think that my prediction would be that things are stable. Often what has happened sometimes is when there's a dramatic fluctuation in the stock market, it has sort of spiked up the car market and prices have gone up, perhaps even artificially. I would hope that things just stay sort of stable. I don't like to see, dramatic. People think, oh, we just love high prices. Well, that has all kinds of other effects, like having sellers think their cars are worth, beyond the sky, and so that can have dramatic adverse effects. So we like steady growth, not crazy growth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, David.
Thank you.
David Gooding. Thank you. And I believe that J. Paul Santangelo is here from our next sponsor, the Santangelo Group at Merrill Lynch. That's the new slide I didn't see. Jay, you'd like to come up and say a word? Of course, we've done this because our sponsors may not have had time this morning to go to the gym, so we make them hop up on the stage. That's your workout for the day. Hi, Jay. How are you?
Good to see you. So can I spend a couple hours talking about the equity market?
Absolutely. All the time you like.
No, actually, David actually brought up a good point that kind of maybe I can dovetail into, and with the effect of the equity markets and the car collector market. And it's really interesting. I come to these events, Pebble Beach and Scottsdale, every year, and I talk to so many people that find out what I do, and they say, well, my advisor doesn't realize I collect cars, and which surprises me. And part of my slide is our goals-based wealth management. Well, at the end of the day, I think a goal that the advisor should know is that you're a car collector, and what can we do to structure a portfolio to help you achieve that goal. And no matter what the equity markets do, is if your portfolio is properly structured for that goal or whatever the goal is, it shouldn't necessarily affect your buying decisions. So, and I've worked with a lot of car collectors expanding, building on their car collection. We've even helped some other clients with warehouses or some type of real estate to expand and store their car collections. And the other thing in your bag, just real quick, is you're going to see an advisor magazine that I put in, and I'm getting words that this is already popular. In case you don't know what this is, it's a pedometer. So you can count your steps and all your physical fitness while you're walking through the auctions. And the reason why I put this in here is I had two clients that normally come to the auctions with me, and unfortunately one of them has had some memory issues, Alzheimer's, early onset, so he can no longer travel. And then last week I had another client, his wife called, comes down here all the time, buys and sells with Gooding and all the other houses, and he's having a heart stent put in, so he's unable to make it this week. So the other discussion that we do have a lot with our clients is really related to health. I think it should be a goal and a priority that we've certainly made with our clients, and so again, it's just kind of a different element that we add to try to help our clients. is from that healthy perspective. Memory care. Unfortunately, another one that's pretty common in the U.S. is obesity and how that affects your money, your wealth, and your health. And the last thing I want to say is, like I said, I've been in the business 26 years. I work with 40 families, very tight practice. We're looking to bring on a couple more families this year. So if we can help you, you know how to reach me.
Thank you, Paul. We all do want to stay healthy enough to enjoy our cars. And speaking of health and enjoyment, our next sponsor, Chubb Insurance, and here to represent Chubb is Paul Morissette, the president of Chubb Insurance Solutions Agency. Paul.
Thank you very much, Donald. Appreciate that. You might say that Chubb has gone through a bit of a frame-off restoration since the last time we all got together. Earlier this month, Chubb and another insurance company known as ACE came together, forming the largest publicly traded property and casualty company in the world, which is really exciting for all of us, and hopefully you will all agree, those of you who are Chubb customers or soon-to-be Chubb customers will see the benefits of that shortly. Our new company stretches all over the world with significant operations in 54 countries, and that translates very well to the collector car market given the number of events that people take their cars to all around the world. But unlike the restoration of a car going through a frame-off situation, a lot hasn't changed. For example, you'll see the same people that you are accustomed to seeing at Gooding & Company that are part of the Chubb sponsorship team and other events. Same group still intact. Our legendary claim service also unchanged. If you're a customer, I can assure you that the agent or the Chubb employee that you deal with today will not be changing. Our ability to insure your collector car, your home, your fine arts, your jewelry collection, any fine possessions you may own also remains unchanged. The combination of ACE and Chubb will allow us to meet your needs in very new and creative ways in the months ahead. And I'd like to just share with you a quick 1-minute clip about the new Chubb.
To be crafted is to meet exacting standards, precision, excellence in execution. When we think about craft, we tend to think about physical things. Wine, art, technology. But what about the crafting of insurance coverage? What if all the precision and expertise we associate with handcrafted things was applied to insurance? ACE and Chubb, two leading insurance companies, are now one. Chubb has a reputation for service dating back over 100 years, and ACE has a global footprint and local knowledge of businesses and people on 5 continents. Together, we are redefining what an insurance company can be. We call it craftsmanship. Because insurance is not generic, it's very personal. It's about the people you love, your home, your business, your employees and shareholders, people and things that matter to you. And at Chubb, when we write a policy, we write it for you. We are a global company, but we are no bigger than our smallest client. And we believe insurance is more than underwriting. It's a craft. Chubb.
Like us to craft for you a nice espresso drink, please enjoy a complimentary beverage on your way out from our espresso bar, or if we can help craft an insurance policy to protect your family and your possessions, see the Chubb team right out front. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Chubb is a terrific company, and now with the new affiliation with ACE, I think that they are poised to do even more wonderful things going forward. And now, speaking of wonderful things, our wonderful panel for today, comprised of Carl Bomstead. Carl, come join us. Jim Pickering, Steve Serio, and myself. Carl Bomstead, from Palm Springs, California, has been a Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance judge for over a decade and served as chief judge at the Kirkland Concours d'Elegance for his first 3 years. He's written for SCM since 1997, and I believe you are the
2 decades.
oldest writer that has written in you've been in every issue.
Oldest, by age or
By experience, yes, that's it. And Jim Pickering from Portland, Oregon. Jim has been tracking the market with SCM since 2006, first as auction editor, and more recently as managing editor of SCM and the publisher of American Car Collector. He is a big enthusiast for muscle cars and all sorts of American cars, trucks, hot rods, all the things that true car lovers love, even if they only drive a Ferrari. And last, and certainly not least, yes, that's right, Steve Serio from Waltham, Mass. Steve is the president and owner of Aston Martin of New England, Lotus Motorsports in Waltham, and is a longtime SCM contributor and someone who loves more than anything else, more than his children, his wife, his family. He loves Aston Martin Lagondas and Countachs. I'm Donald Osborne, your moderator. I'm also from Palm Springs, and it's just a coincidence. It's not that I moved there because Carl was already down there, but it was actually true. Longtime contributor to SCM and auction analyst. I write a column, the Accettarini column, which some of you may read and others may actually enjoy. I've written also for a lot of other publications, the New York Times, Haggerty's Magazine, Business Week Online, and I was co-host for 2 seasons on What's My Car Worth with Keith, and now you can see me on CNBC Primetime on Jay Leno's Garage, hosting the segment Assess and Caress with Donald Osborne, shameless plug. We'll have new episodes out later in the spring. I'm really happy to be here. I make my living as a professional classic car appraiser and consultant, and in your little goodie bags is a brochure for me, so if you need my services, please don't hesitate to call. So, first of all, we're going to do something that we've done with these seminars for the past number of years. We've been tracking a number of cars, and we'll ask the panel to give their opinions on what the current values are and if they seem to be accurate and what the directionality of it means. The overall theme of this seminar, looking forward to 2020, is something that we've discussed at great length, and I think we all agree, do we not, gentlemen, that since our crystal balls are in the shop, you're not going to hear from us what we think a particular car is going to be selling for in 5 years. Rather, an idea of what we think the market might be doing in terms of where it's been and how that indicates possible future trends. So let's take a look at the cars we've been tracking. First is the 68 to 76 Triumph TR6. And we haven't seen a lot of movement in this car. This year, it's listed as $18,000 to $35,000. I think this is a great example of a car which is eminently collectible, but not particularly an investment quality car. Steve?
I'm going to take a broad swing at this whole page and tell you that you can move on because none of this has changed since the last we spoke. And I'm only being partially glib here. Starting off with the Triumph, the way the market has gone, I think, in the last 6 months is anything that is a broad commodity made in large numbers, and that includes all of these cars, with the Gullwing, or the Gullwing being the most expensive and the Triumph being the least expensive. This is going to be the exact same speech. If you listen to it in in Pebble Beach, you may hear the exact same thing today. I don't think the Triumph is going anywhere, and probably out of all the cars here, maybe the one thing now, because of its affordability, that may tick up in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, because the rotten ones are becoming more rotten and going into the ground, and the survivors may be worth a few bucks more.
Well, it's an interesting point, and let me ask Jim this question as well. There's a whole category of cars. People often ask us, are these cars collectible? And confusing collectability with investment and appreciation. A car is collectible because people are interested in it because they can use it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think usability really is the key here. I mean, if you're using a car, you're going to develop a relationship with it, and that relationship, I think, is what's going to drive collectability in the future. You're not going to buy something that you don't understand and you don't have some sort of feeling for. And I think a Triumph TR6 is a great entry-level car. I mean, 18 grand to 35 grand, that's not a whole lot to pay to get a pretty good one. And I agree. I don't think it's probably going to go up a whole lot in the near future, but as a usable car, I think it's a good place to start.
And Carl?
Well, I think as you look at that, the values you put on the Triumph have gone up dramatically year over year, and I don't think that's realistic. I think, however, the value of a car is very much driven by what you're going to do with it, the usability of the car. You look at a Porsche, because there's an active Porsche Club of America group, I think you're going to see those values continue to appreciate because there's something to do with the car. You've got a purpose to have the car.
And I think that, for me, the car like TR6 represents a car that you can buy a good one, maintain it well, use it, and basically drive it for free. This is not something you're going to buy because it's going to increase in value dramatically, but you're going to be able to enjoy the car and actually use it and not lose money on it like you would for a new toy car. The next slide is a Porsche 356C SC. We've certainly seen a big movement in the prices of Porsches, 356s especially. Especially Porsches that seem to be lacking paint and have some corrosion, things like that. How do you see this market, Steve?
You're not going to live through this discussion today, I promise you. What was the question again, Donald? Yes, I think, one question I want to just ask the room. How many people have been to one of these before? And how many, so most everybody's been here before, okay. And first-timers, no. Okay.
Almost a third of the room.
It's good. Well, some of you may find some of this a tad repetitive for the next 5 minutes. This car, again, to Carl's point, out of these 5 cars especially, probably the most usable thing you can either use on a 1,000-mile rally or go for a cup of coffee. And along with the Mercedes-Benz, something you can park and leave for a year on a trickle charger and will start and give you the least amount of headaches on this page. So, yeah, these things are one of my favorite cars, rusty or non-rusty, Donald, and it's exactly where you left it in August. I mean, a great car is 120 maybe for the top of the food chain car with a sunroof and original paint. You can double these numbers, and then you can certainly spend half of this for a project.
Carl?
Well, I'm not sure a 20% increase year over year is realistic, but I think the key thing in a 356 is the condition. I mean, they are so prone to rust. There's so many hidden pockets. So you buy what you think is a nice car, and then you find out that your $100,000 that you spent was just a starting point. You're going to be writing check on top of check on top of check to get it in a usable condition. So that's a situation where it certainly pays to get, if you're not familiar with the cars, you like them, and decide you want one, to get some help in buying it.
Jim?
Anything with a Porsche badge has been hot for, 2 years now, 3 years now? And, what I said for the TR6 in terms of usability goes even double for the SC. It's such a usable car, really, for whatever you want to do with it. Now, like what Carl was saying, if you buy one right, you get one that doesn't have the issues that some of them might have. I think there's still quite a bit of room to move up.
Well, what's interesting to me about this pricing is the fact that most of the actual big movement in 356s have been in the earlier cars that hadn't appreciated a great deal, the pre-A's, things like that. And in these later cars, again, people buy them for a different reason than they buy the pre-A's and all of that stuff and the 4Cams. These are cars that people buy to use.
No, I think the one thing that really hit me at the Rennsport reunion in October with Porsches in general is that they transcend age groups, they transcend economic groups, geographic groups, and you can spend $10,000 on a car, on some old Porsche, and have a great car. You can spend $10 million on one and have a great car. I think to your point about market moving, the early cars have gone up a lot because they were underappreciated for a great many years and they're damn difficult to find. But I would also throw in the cars that have moved the most are like the 3 cars you're seeing outside that our comedian friend is auctioning off in Amelia Island. The rarest of the rare Porsches, the things that were made 1 of 10, 1 of 20, 1 of 50, 1 of 100, those cars have just gone to the moon, and it doesn't seem to be any any room to stop them at the moment.
Well, again, to Steve's point, and we'll go to the next slide. Oops, I'm sorry. The Jaguar. We're seeing, I think, I'm seeing certainly, and I'll ask my colleagues here, you'll notice on these slides that the ranges have been getting wider. Even if the top doesn't go up much, the ranges have been getting wider, and I think that in this market, I think we've all been seeing that people are buying individual cars, not the model. So people are looking at a specific car and what attributes it has and reflecting that in the value. What do you think about that, Carl?
Well, I think that's correct. So you look at, the 400,000 for an XKE. Well, it better be a flat floor, and it better be pretty darn exciting. And I'm not sure you're looking at a doubling of value year over year in this particular case, but there have been some isolated instances where that is true. So it's, again, if something you have to have, you can afford it, you want it, so what?
Steve?
Yeah, the range here just speaks for itself more than the other cars. It really.
Rains a lot in Portland. They have nothing else to do.
E-types, I think they're falling off a little bit. The trend, I think if we get into the trend discussion will come up, but I think as other Haggerty had pointed it out, from what I understand at a discussion last night, things are shifting towards newer cars as newer money come into the marketplace, younger money, younger guys, and things like the E-Type I think will fall off, much like the Ferrari and the Gullwing to a point over the next little bit. I think it's gonna stay flat.
And we can go to our next car. I have to confess this, I've always hated this picture. Next seminar, we have to replace that picture.
I hated the last picture. It's just the worst example.
Is it the wheels?
It's horrifying. But the Ferrari 250 GTE, which for a very, very long time was sort of the great entry-level 250 Ferrari, and
I think that was Keith's car. That's why it's up there. If he's not going to be here, he's going to be the pincushion today.
Exactly. You got to show up. And so, Steve, what do you think about this?
Much like I said in August, I don't get these cars. I don't get why they went up so much. They were dragged up with the rising tide of Ferraris. And I think if all of the dealers in the room are being honest, and I know there are a handful of them in here, this is nothing I'd want in inventory right now. I think there's outliers where great examples certainly go above this number. I don't know who those people are that are buying these cars, and I hope you're not in this room and I'm not insulting you if you paid $800,000 for a four-seat Ferrari recently. I think this may hiccup down 10, 15, 20%.
To put the cat among the pigeons, which I've been known to do every now and then, what's the difference between this four-seat Ferrari and a four-seat Aston Martin?
All the Aston Martins had 4 seats, knucklehead. That's why. You can't get
So
a
it's a choice.
two-seat
No.
Aston Martin. Yeah,
I asked the question quite innocently.
It's sort of assumed that you'll get a 2+2 with an Aston, with the exception of some very late, rare cars, or the DB2, an earlier car. It's just assumed with the Aston. It's part of the charm of the car. With the Ferrari, it's a big knock.
Do you think it's, and this is not certainly a knock on Ferrari, because you see the same thing sometimes with Porsche, do you think it's more a case of some people that are out there in the market buying a badge rather than buying a car?
Sure. I mean, I think that you can put a Ferrari logo on a roll of toilet paper and people will overpay for it. It's the strongest brand in the world. I mean,
as long as it's licensed.
Yeah,
You
as long-
can't
as
just
long
do
as
this
it's
on your own. Do not go
So,
home and put
yeah.
this on a roll of toilet paper. Don't do it.
Yeah, there is that. I mean, Porsche is a strong brand, Coca-Cola, Playboy, all those logos that have stuck with you for years. But that logo especially, and that branding is truly remarkable. You go to an airport in Italy and you see all the people rushing in. It's part of the lifestyle. It's part of the fabric of the country. And it goes all over the world. So yeah, these things get dragged up. Why else would you buy a 400i? 400i owners in the room, settle down. Why would you buy a car like that? Because
the Lagonda is not available. Only thing I can think of. Jim, you were going to say something.
You know, I don't think that I really understand why these cars have gone up as high as they have either. But they do have the V12. They do have, you know, the feel and the sound. I mean, you can say what you want about whether or not they drive like trucks, but, you know, I think the days are over of people buying these and turning them into SWB clones. And, you know, there could very well be that there will be some more growth, but I kind of would doubt that. I think that we've seen what we're going to see here.
I think so too. Carl?
Well, I think this is an example of a car where you could really get it handed to you in a bucket. I mean, the purpose goes back to why do you buy a car? If you want it to show, you want it to tour with, you want it to look at, whatever. This is a car that somebody can say, wow, Ferraris are appreciating, I'm going to make money, I'm going to buy a Ferrari, and there you go. And you're buying the wrong car at the wrong time, and you're going to get it handed to you, potentially.
And the last of the cars that we're tracking in our series, the 300SL Coupe, otherwise known as the Gullwing. And this is a really interesting thing for me, and I'm dying to get the opinion of the panelists on this, because I've got a very clear idea of what I think is happening with the values here and what it means in terms of collecting for the last few years. Carl?
Well, if you look at your range here, of course, you're looking at the high end being the alloy-bodied car, and how many of those come up to market. I mean, there's very infrequent, and when they do, they're selling in that range. But I think if you're looking at just the run-of-the-mill 300 SL, I think they've leveled out at the lower range. I think they've kind of had their run-up. Everybody who wants one has one. There's one now at one or two at every auction, and they all seem to be hovering around the low-end entry-level price that we have here, which I think is appropriate.
Jim?
We were talking about value in use earlier today before the seminar started, and I think this really kind of ticks all the boxes when it comes to value in use. I mean, here is a car that you can do anything with. You can take anywhere. You can go on any event. You could drive it daily if you wanted to.
Jim, I'm going to take issue with you because you look at some of the tour events like the Copper State and the Colorado Grand, they get so many submissions that they are very selective on those. You know, they don't want 13 300 SLs on the tour. So just because you buy one does not mean that you have automatic entry.
Just the same, though, it is a car that you can use as much as you want to. And now whether or not you can get into the event you want to get into because there's already 10 there, that's a separate issue. But you know, assuming you can get in, this is a car that will work for you while you're there. And to me, I would want to own something that I can use. And when it gets to the top of the market, you're looking at $1 million cars. This is pretty much the best of the best as far as I'm concerned.
To add on to what Jim said, the beauty of the 300 SLs is they're such an active group. I mean, they're it's like the Porsche Club of America, but it's a smaller group, obviously, but they're very supportive and very active.
Steve?
Well, I mean, it's one of the greatest cars of all time. The interesting thing about the history of the pricing on this, unlike some of the other cars which have tripled in the last 5 years, and now they're starting to ratchet back, which is just sort of normal in any market with something that escalates the way it does so quickly, it's going to hiccup and come down and correct a little bit. There was never a hockey stick in the value of this car almost from new. When it was a used car, yes, they became very inexpensive and they were traded like used cars. But since the mid-'60s, if you track the pricing of SLs, it was always just a steady growth. And in the last few years, yeah, I mean, they've effectively doubled in the last 5 years. I think it'll settle down a little bit more. A lot more of them have come to market because I think the people who have had them a very long time, I know a handful of collectors, and collector's a funny word. I think it gets thrown around incorrectly sometimes. Collector to me is a guy who has set out sometime in his life, a guy or a girl, and they've done this as a hobby, they've done it as a passion, they've done it as a love, and they've done it for at least 10, 15, or 20 years. That's a true collector. A lot of things that get sold as collections today, I don't know. I sort of, my hair on the back of my neck goes up a little bit. But all the collectors that had these cars when they were $30, $40, $50, $60,000 have decided, I'd rather have the $1 million because I've done so well with this car, loving it and using it, and I might be 80 years old now, I'd rather have the money. So a lot of these cars are coming to market that have never been sold before.
Yeah, Steve, you brought up something which is, I think, key to watching this price trend is the fact that we had also a big spike in the top prices because a lot of those very valuable cars, the alloy cars, et cetera, which had not come to the market for 2 decades because their owners held on to them, suddenly have come to the market, and so they make that spike. The other thing is, a couple of years ago, I gave a chat for the at the Gullwing Group's annual meeting. It was held down in the desert that year, and about 65 people in the room. And normally when a talk like this is given to a club, the questions usually revolve around how much money can I afford to put in the car without being upside down? That obviously was not the conversation at the Gullwing Group. But I thought I'd ask a question. How many people in the room had owned their car for more than 10 years? Everyone in the room raised their hand. I said, oh, okay, 20 years. Half of the people in the room raised their hand. And so I said, thank you. And then somebody shouted out, how about 30 years? A third of the room. More than that, there were 3 people in the room that had owned their cars for 50 years. And so one of the things that was always true about the 300SL Roadster and Gullwing was the fact that they were so usable. But these cars were being used by people who had paid between $15,000 and $60,000 for them. And the question would be, how would they be used by the people who are now paying $1 million and $2 million for them? Would they use them in the same way? The point that Carl brought up about usability, I've been blessed enough to do the Mille Miglia a couple of times, and it's astonishing the number of 300SL Gullwings in the Mille Miglia, more than ever ran it when the event was new. And so you do run that risk. There are some events that want more variety in the event, so they won't automatically take a Gullwing now. But you also find that with, especially Mercedes-Benz and with Porsches, that the range of prices can be wider than ever because it's all about the specific car. Is it the one-owner car with the great history and the great equipment, which can bring double or triple or quadruple sometimes what other examples can bring? But it's okay because people are buying the car for the reasons they want to use it. I think that's very true. Now we're going to get sort of to the heart of today's discussion, which is a snapshot of today's market broken out into 4 groups: antiques and classics, sports and imports 1955 to 1974, American muscle, and contemporary sports cars 1990 to present. And this is the 2020 A Vision of the Future, where each of us picks out our hottie and our going nowhere fast. Now, as I said before, none of us have our crystal balls out, so this is our gut based on what we have seen happen in the last few years. Also, you'll have the opportunity, this is the famous SCM Insider Seminar audience participation section, because at the end of it, we also get to pick our heartthrob pick. All the cars that are being auctioned here this week in Arizona, we pick the one that we think we'd like to go home with, and we also have to name the price that we would pay for it. And the one that is the most popular with you, our audience, gets this award, which traditionally has gone to Steve Serio because he has given you all $1 as you came in. But I carefully watched him before the event started, so I know he didn't have a chance to pay you off. So I've had my name engraved on the bottom of it. Thank you so much. I'd like to thank you all for coming. This has been a great, wonderful. Have a great week. No, just kidding. Okay. Yes, Steve, you're going to get it again. Don't worry.
I'm good. I'm waiting. I'll pick my moments.
All right, the first category, hot and not, $50,000 or less. Our first is Carl. Carl, why did you pick these 2 very interesting cars?
I have had 1965 Rivieras on my list for 4 years, and nothing's happened. I even found out that another seminar that happened yesterday, the 65 Riviera, was on the list of a car that's going to appreciate. I mean, I love the cars. I've had several of them. They're phenomenal. There's a Grand Sport over in the far corner that went later on this afternoon. I hope you go get a chance to look at. In my mind, they should be appreciating, as should 56 Continental Mark IIs. They are not. This is the last year I'm having Rivieras on my list. If nothing happens in a year, I'm not going to use them again. But
the curse of Carl Baum said on
it
the Riviera,
is
and the
curse.
Riviera will be lifted.
It is the curse. Now, on the other side of the coin, I have to quantify or qualify my answer here, because I'm not including E codes, F codes. I'm not including highly restored Thunderbirds. I'm looking at the run-of-the-mill Thunderbird. That's a 85-point car. They're $25,000 to $35,000. You could restore it for $100,000 and your car is worth $60,000. Or you can just drive it, have fun with it, enjoy it. A couple of years from now, you'll probably get your money back.
And I think that, again, goes back to the thing that we mentioned before about the going nowhere fast selection is not, at least for me, and I know for Carl and for Jim and for Steve, this is not that we're saying these are cars that are no good. These are cars that you can still buy and enjoy, and many people will buy them and enjoy them, but they're not the thing that's going to get you your Greek island in 3 years. Next, I guess, are my picks. The hottie is the Porsche 914 2-liter. It's a car that I think is absolutely fantastic. They're a lot of fun to drive. It's a kind of car that, as I said before, you can buy a very good one, drive it, enjoy it, and I think there's tremendous upside potential for this because I see throughout the market cars that are being recognized for their dynamic capability and not simply for their reputation. People who've never driven 914 say, oh, you don't want one of those. Really, drive one. Find out if you want one or not. And going nowhere fast, and this is sort of shocking for everyone who knows me, oh, he picked the German car as the appreciating and the Italian car is going nowhere fast? Yeah. An Alfa Romeo Abnormale. An Abnormale is an old Alfa Club term for a car that's had the mechanicals replaced. You have a nice Normale Spider or Normale Sprint, and you basically give it veloce specs by putting a bigger engine in it. And if it had a 1300, you put a 1600, or even a 2-liter in it, had a 4-speed transmission, put a 5-speed in, put disc brakes in, all of which make the car very enjoyable and very drivable. But as an investment, people are now looking for the cars that are stock. If you're lucky enough to find a car that has been modified but still has its original mechanicals, then you've got the world covered. I think that's a great place to be. Jim.
My hottie pick, Toyota Supra Turbo. Now, you guys can say what you want about the Fast and the Furious generation, but these cars here are a halo car for these people, especially in this country. They were overbuilt from the factory, and that's part of the reason why they've become a halo car. You can put a whole lot of boost through one of these motors and not break it and make 1,000 horsepower. Now, that gets a lot of eyeball out at the racetrack when you're running 1,000 horsepower in a car that can't grab the ground. It's all over the place. So with a car like this, because it has so much eyeball and because there are so many people that find it to be dear, I think we're going to see, especially for cars that haven't been modified, a run-up in value. Now, we've seen a median price of about $21,000, $22,000. I wouldn't be surprised to see $35,000 on these cars in the next 4 years, but only on cars that have not been modified. That's really going to be the key here. Now, the other side to this, Porsche 911 SC, these cars are fabulous cars. We had one of these at Sports Car Market, had 180,000 miles on it, and the doors closed like a safe. I mean, the thing was just a tank. And to prove my point, the photo that I picked here, a friend of mine, Paul, fell asleep at the wheel and drove the car through the middle of a wheat field, and nothing happened to it. It was fine. He was picking wheat out of it for a few weeks after that, but that was about it. Now, they built too many of these cars. They're fantastic cars, but there's just too many of them, I think, to support more value moving up. We've seen about $30,000 on the median price on these cars, and I wouldn't expect to see much more just because they don't break.
But again, to talk about a car that's got a lot of character, that's eminently usable, and you can use it practically as an everyday car. Mm-hmm. I also want to say one thing, that the Toyota Supra Turbo also is an interesting car because I think it's also cross-generational. There are a lot of guys my age, ancient, who also think that they're very cool cars and look great. So I think the car that appeal to all ages. Steve. Oh, by the way, Steve cheated, as he always does in these things, and picked like 16 cars in every category. So go ahead, Steve.
I have a lot of demons in my head. It's like if you can imagine a circus of those little wind-up monkeys with the things, this is what I have to live with every day. The stuff I will talk about, and I'm going to blanket my comments for everything that I talk about as, I don't think of any of these things as investments. You should be buying all of these cars, and you've heard me say this before, because you love to do it. If you make a little bit of money on it, fantastic. If you're looking at this as investments, you just go get a bucket of ice water and go soak your head, because it's a terrible game to play. And I'll also talk about things that I am involved with personally, cars I might own, so I'm sort of preaching about what I do with my own money here. So And to call something hot or not, and going into 2020, Donald and I joked about this with Keith. I don't know. Being in this business for 30 years, I can't tell you what's going to happen in March, because if I knew what was going to happen in 2020, I would be going into that room with $5 million, buying cars, and then going away until then because I was so smart. But for fun's sake and for going out and enjoying something, I fall into that weird category of, and Jim talked about this the last seminar. I bought an old Land Rover, and I've seen, and I had one 30 years ago as a utilitarian truck. It was my transportation. So recently I bought a 1960 Land Rover because I wanted something fun to create memories with my kids. There has been movement in that market because people like old trucks. They're usable, they're friendly, they don't cost a lot of money, and it's the whole purpose of this is going to the beach, having fun, and spilling ice cream everywhere. So that serves a purpose, but it seems to serve a purpose for a lot of people because those things are becoming valuable, whether they're Toyotas or Land Rovers. Personally, again, I have an old Alpha that for 20% of the cost of what that GTA is out there, which is a magnificent car, that old 66 Alpha will give you 85% of the same enjoyment and thrill, and you don't have to modify the car crazily. So I like those personally. The stuff that is going nowhere fast, I think with each and every day that passes and month that passes, people become more sophisticated. There's a lot more information out there today and anything, and I'm agreeing with Donald for the first time in probably a decade. I'm going to call mine Franken-Porsche. He called his Abnormales. I think anything that's been modified, and when you read about something that, hey, I worked on it myself, I changed the engine myself, I put a 1993 engine in a 1978 car, great. If you have that much money to waste, God bless you, because I don't know who you're going to sell that and pass it on to. And when you buy something like that, you better consider it very long term, because no one else is you're making a suit. If you're a 400-pound guy that's 4 feet tall and you like polka dot jackets with striped pants and that's your suit, fantastic. Try selling it to somebody else. So that's where I think is going right off the edge.
Well said. Okay, now we move to the next category, $500,000, and this is where people can be injured with running with scissors. So, Carl?
Well, excuse me, I use the 63 Corvette split window Z06 as an illustrative car of documented performance cars that I think will continue to be of interest as we go forward. The Z06 was a $2,000 option. They only made a couple of hundred of them. So the car that's documented, that we know what we're buying, and be it a Corvette or be it any other limited production performance car, I think as we look forward, as Steve said, look, we can't predict what's going to happen in 2020, let alone what's going to happen in April. So it's, and if we could, I'd be in the Mediterranean in my yacht, but that's my guess for now. As far as something that's not going anywhere, it's with sadness I put down a 53 Skylark. It's a car that I absolutely love. I've had one. They're incredibly expensive to restore. I think they're gorgeous. I think they epitomize the 50s. They used to be $300,000. One went for $400,000. Now $1.25 all day long, and that's where they've been, and that's where they're staying.
And they're no less beautiful for that, but that's fine. My picks in this category, the Maserati Kamzen. I mean, a lot of people have been talking about how Maseratis have always been undervalued, et cetera, et cetera. And their values have been coming up. But also, we get into the fact that now cars of the late 60s, early 70s, people are appreciating the style of them more. People have been afraid of these cars because of some of the Citroën hydraulics involved in them. But again, experience now has sorted out most of those issues. And frankly, drive a car, drive a Kamzen, look at it. It is pure sculpture. It is absolutely amazing.
It's Maserati's Lagonda. This is the ugliest car ever made. Go ahead. What is wrong with you? You put this in here just to get my ire up. My 8th shot of espresso is now hitting my brain. I'm not going to let you get away with this. I challenge you to find 5 of these that are running anywhere in the world. Okay, continue. Go ahead. I'll pick my spots. Yeah, everybody, go out and buy a Kamzen. How to Make a Small Fortune in the Car Business by Donald Osmond. Buy
Indeed.
a Kamzen with a big fortune.
The fact that anyone who compared
continue.
the looks of the Kamzen with the looks of the fourth series Lagonda is just not there. But the Kamzen is recognized by people who understand style as one of the most beautiful cars, the people who are here on the stage wearing Charvet bow ties as opposed to whatever. Well, just saying. And the going nowhere fast, again, I sort of set the cat among the pigeon. Porsche 911, short wheelbase, 2 liters. Fabulous car, has tremendous, shown tremendous
on?
appreciation. That is not on. No, that microphone is off. And it's a car that is a terrific vehicle, but I don't think that going forward in the next 5 years, you'll see the same kind of appreciation. Again, if this really turns you on, it's an important car for Porsche history. Buy one, enjoy it, just have a nice life.
Buy one, enjoy it. It'll run every day. You can get parts for it. Go ahead.
Yes, it's hard to get parts for a short wheelbase Porsche 911 2-liter, isn't it? Jim.
Steve, I know how you feel about Countachs, but they made my list again. Now, as for what I said back in August when we were in Monterey, you've got a younger generation here that's moving in, and these cars were the poster car for a certain generation, and these guys are now getting to a place in their lives where they have some disposable income and they're able to buy the cars they always wanted. Now, I don't think it matters that they don't work or that they overheat.
I agree with you.
But it doesn't matter to these guys. They just want to own the car that they've always wanted to own. I think it's a status symbol, and I think we're going to see more movement here on this side of the market.
It's the same reason why men marry really stupid, beautiful women, by the way. Go ahead.
So the flip side
I
of
am
that,
not going to text your wife on that, Steve, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not going to touch that one. The going nowhere fast side of things, I don't want to just pick on closed pre-war Packards. It's really
Because you're sitting next to Carl Baumstead.
It's anything pre-war that I think
Is this on?
that I think it's stately, but where's the excitement? That's what the buyer that's looking for the Countach, I don't think is going to be getting excited about something like a closed formal sedan.
Jim, I think I disagree with you because not necessarily on the sedans, but I think coupes of the 30s are really having a resurgency. There was a period of time when the tops fell off coupes. I mean, people turned coupes into roadsters because they're more valuable. Well, now I think the elegance of the closed coupes is becoming apparent, and they're becoming even more collectible than they were then. And so I really take issue with you on that one, pal.
You're absolutely right, actually. And I was looking at the numbers of the sales numbers from the last 4 years prior and looking at where it's going to go from there. And if you look at the numbers from 2011 through 2015, the numbers have grown significantly across the board for cars like this. And I think that shows what you have just said, that they have in fact gotten a resurgence in the market. But what I'm saying is, as things move into the future, I don't see that continuing. I think we're going to see it level.
And again, I disagree with you because I'm involved with the Classic Car Club of America, and you're actually seeing an increase in membership where people are saying it's an elderly organization. Well, partially true, but you're actually seeing the membership is actually growing. So I think as you look forward, there are new people coming in that will appreciate the cars.
Again, I think it's all about the individual car as opposed to a category of car. Steve?
I think I may shock Jim. I agree with everything he said about the Countach and a lot of the pre-war cars. It's well known, much like the Lagonda, the Kamzen and the Countach. I don't understand them, but I have seen, we've all seen the spike in all of the guys that have wanted one, and they're iconic. The early periscopic cars are stratospheric in value now, and they're dragging up the cars Jim talked about. And I'm not trying to pile on with going nowhere fast. I didn't pick those two pictures. I had said to the guys at SCM, I actually think the older pre-war cars are slowing down. They happen to come up with a Lincoln K V12, which I don't even know what that is, and I know what a Packard Caribbean is. And I think a lot of those cars are settling. Having said that, I was mesmerized by the Mecum auction over the last week in Florida, where there are people still buying these cars. They're at lower prices, but there still is a hell of an audience spending money on those cars. So they're not worthless. I just think they're becoming less valuable because of their age. The two cars I picked, Donald, are Porsches, shocking, that are up here that I think are better places to put money, because the later cars, to Jim's point, the Fast and Furious guys, from the 90s Porsches onward, whether they're 993s or even 964s, 993s, that's a picture of a Sport Classic, which is a limited edition car that was made for the rest of the world, not in the United States. I bought one because I loved it. It was dumb luck that the car has gone up twice in value since I've owned it in the last 3 years, which I didn't predict. I think those cars, that's a representation of something from the 90s and 2000s, which is, I'm going to jump ahead and disagree with Carl here on the Ford GT. I think the Ford GTs are still, they're room to go
Warning,
north
spoiler alert.
because of the age. So, but again, the early Porsche is up there because that represents something completely different. That, to me, is an original car. I happen to have a picture of a 1953 Porsche with, when I sold it, 19,000 miles on it. I think what's hot is things that are clearly original and well preserved, and we will get into this debate a little bit later about preserved, what's a barn find, what's original. But I think the things that are hot, especially under $500,000, are cars that are like they were built. When they were built in the 70s, 80s, 90s, or 60s or 50s, anything that is original, it may be more valuable at a later date.
Okay, here we are at the sky is the limit. Fasten your seatbelts. This is where you absolutely must be spending other people's money. Carl.
Well, first I want to go back to Steve's comment on the Lincoln 12s not going anywhere fast. I think they are an amazing value as compared to a Packard 12. They're about half the cost. They're a quality car, and I think they're a value if you want a good touring car. But I agree with Steve, their value, they have not really gone anywhere all that quickly. As far as the Cadillac that I referenced is really just an illustrative point of coach-built cars, quality coach-built unique cars that I think are going to continue to appreciate and continue to be of interest, be it a 50s Cadillac like this, some of the custom-bodied Packards, the Dietrichs, the LeBarons, and so on, or even the coach-built European cars, I think will be of interest for the foreseeable future. As far as, again, the Ford GT is somewhat illustrative. I remember at one of these sessions about 10 years ago, Keith was moderating this, and a fellow in the audience was adamant about wanting to buy one. And Keith was adamant about the fact that they were going to go absolutely nowhere. They were a used car, they were going to depreciate, and I don't know what the guy did. Hopefully he bought the car, because they did go from 150 to 300, but they've stayed there and they haven't really moved. I think a lot of the 90s performance cars are still in the used car cycle. I mean, they're still depreciating, and they haven't hit the collector car uptick yet.
Well, it's an interesting conversation about the sort of modern collectibles, which we can get into another time. But my picks for the sky's the limit, the Hottie, one of the most spectacular cars ever built, the Alfa Romeo TZ1 Tubolare Zagato, a racing car that's a sports racing car. You can drive this on the street if you want to. You can drive it in any event on the track, for rallies, etc. This particular one that's in the picture is my absolute favorite TZ1 on the entire planet. It's a car that's owned in the UK, and it's that wonderful green. It's the original color of that car, so all Italian cars don't have to be red. And my example of going nowhere fast is another modern collectible, the 2007 Mercedes-Benz SLR McLaren. And this is the special edition 722 to celebrate the great Mille Miglia car SLR of Sterling Moss. And again, not that this is a car that is worthless. There will always be an interest, especially in a limited edition car. But again, I don't think that there'll be the same kind of massive appreciation in this car that you find with the McLaren F1, for instance. And just like the Ford GT, I think this will be a car that someone will be able to buy and enjoy and certainly not lose money on. It might appreciate 5%, 10% by the time they get a chance to sell it. And
But who's buying them and driving them? That's the problem. There's a whole, the sadness is a lot of these cars, especially the Ford GT, you see them advertised with not 100 miles on them, but tens of miles on them. I agree with you that you could use it, but there's the basis here for their own little collectible niche, and nobody's buying them to drive them. There are people buying these cars that are collecting those late model cars. I mean, I see it every single day. So, I don't know, I don't get the McLaren 722 either, but I wouldn't hedge against it any more than I'd hedge against the Ford GT or, for that matter, Jim's McLaren P1.
I think one of the things that I am seeing in people with whom I'm speaking is the fact that people are looking less at, especially for the moderns, buying cars and keeping them in the wrappers. People are getting the fact that if you're going to spend the money, you might as well spend some time behind the wheel and actually drive them on the road, because there's no additional benefit to be gained by not driving your car, quite frankly. And Jim?
Well, I think the Ferrari 250 SWB is always going to be hot. This car, it has great sounds, great dynamics, great looks, and it's really the next best thing to a GTO. Now, we can't all have GTOs, but there are more of these out there. Well, I know I can't. So I would suggest that the 250 SWB is still have some room to move, and you know it's always going to be, I think, where serious Ferrari collectors end up. It's that reach that they're all going to want to reach for. Now, the flip side of that, the McLaren P1. It's really the hottest missile today, right? This is the car that has the most cutting-edge technology inside it to make the most power, and it's also a hybrid, so it has, you know, quite a bit going for it. But because it's on the cutting edge, I think that's going to work against it. We're looking 4 years into the future. It's not going to be on the cutting edge in 4 years. It's not like they're going to stop building McLarens or stop building 918 Porsches or stop building any of the modern supercars. And by the time a few years roll by, it's not going to be the hot ticket anymore. So I would suggest that it's probably not going to see a whole lot more movement than it already has.
But it's not going to be the first series Lagonda of the next decade.
Just can't help yourself. I graciously disagree with Jim on that. I think when the Carrera GT Porsche came out in 05, nobody predicted it would be worth more today. The 918 is already worth more than this. I think at the top technology within any company at any given time is what a lot of people choose to collect and drive. They like the best car made by that manufacturer at that time. And there are exceptions to that. I don't think anybody has made a cracker or has enjoyed driving an Aston Martin 177 yet. It just was a failure. It was a lot of money. It was $2 million. I think they're probably worth half of that now. So there are ways to sort of fight my point here. But I don't know. I think there's a different way to go with the top car in each manufacturer every generation.
There you are.
So, to Donald's point, I picked a lot of things, and I'll try not to waffle about this. The sky's the limit on the big cars you see up there. I think the very top of the food chain cars, the XKSS, the Zagato, the Scaglietti-bodied Ferrari, the Lusso is up there because that's an original paint 24,000-mile Lusso. The 550A is up there because that was a missing works car and is original, and you can see by the look on the car it was missing for a great many years. I think anything like that above me, people, they're the top of the food chain, billionaire, 100 millionaire kind of guy. These are the things they're chasing, and that's a whole different world. It's not reality. It's the 1/1000th of 1% of the collector car world. But if this is what we're talking about, that's what's still moving.
And finally, we get to our heartthrob choices, and please pay attention, very close attention here, because you're going to have to vote shortly. And remember, Donald Osborne.
The most undrivable thing will be Donald's pick.
Donald Osborne. Okay, first up, quite annoyingly, is my good friend Carl Baumstead.
Well, my thought process on going through this was I have a friend in Los Angeles who has an incredible collection of Zagato-bodied cars. I mean, every time I go to his facility, I get truly excited. And so when I'm going through the catalog, I see that RM has the 1900 Zagato, and I say, okay, that's definitely my choice. But then I get another catalog, and I look at the Buono-bodied that we notice out here that we walked by as we came in and say, okay, I've got to spend, what, $500,000 restoring the car, but I think it's a little swoopier. So that's kind of how I ended up with that car. Now the question was, how am I going to pay for it? My wife's trust fund. She doesn't know it yet. She doesn't even know she has a trust fund, but as long as I'm having fun, I might as well pay for it that way.
An excellent choice. And my heartthrob choice, shockingly enough, the 1955 Alfa Romeo 1900 CSS Buono Coupe. I love this car. It's absolutely astonishing. The Buono made 3 variations of this basic design. They bodied an Alfa Romeo 63000 CM, which was a rebody of a car that was driven at Le Mans by Juan Manuel Fangio, and then later given or bought, depending on the story, by Juan Perón of Argentina. And it had this amazing Buono body, which is very similar to this car. And it was then bought subsequently by a fellow who was a friend of mine, Henry Wessels, who vintage raced the car, because after all it was a Le Mans Fangio car, and wrecked it at the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix. He rolled. Fortunately, he was not injured, but the car was basically destroyed. And so he made the choice to have it rebodied with a replica of the original Colli body. So they tossed away the Buono body. And they did this car, this 1900, as well as a Fiat 1400, which has been lost. So it's out there somewhere, but no one's found it yet. So this is the only example of this one that's still around. I saw this car for the first time 2 years ago at Retromobile, where a dealer was offering it for sale. And then I saw it again on the lawn at Pebble Beach in the preservation class, which is interesting because it's been repainted. But I think that after this $500,000 restoration, restoring it to its wonderful bumblebee colors of yellow and a black top, I think the car will be absolutely stunning. And as Carl said before about the Cadillac Ghia, I think that one of the most important things, and as Steve said, about collecting, is that a car has got to make an emotional connection with you. You've got to connect with this car on any level, whether it be driving, technology, styling, and coach-built cars just have a personality that production cars just will never have. And I think it's always something that will always draw people. Jim.
It's interesting, you were just talking about emotion. Now, anybody who was at the ACC seminar yesterday heard me talk about this. In 1970, my dad, fresh off the plane back from Vietnam, walked into Canals Chevrolet in Tigard, Oregon, and bought a 70 Chevelle SS454 LS6. That's the car on the bottom there. Now, 10 years later, I was born, and he had to sell it. Now, ever since, this car has sort of been a unicorn in our family. I don't have the VIN number, I wish I did. But over at Barrett Jackson, there is a Fathom Blue SS LS6 car, same colors, same stripes, same everything, and that is the car that I would buy, and I would probably give it back to him because I feel like I cost him that when I came into the world.
That's fantastic. And Steve?
Something pedestrian, Donald.
It's a Fiat 124, right?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I don't have some tedious Fangio story to tell about the car and how somebody wrecked something that has nothing to do with my pick. I actually owned one of these for 10 years and I miss it. That's as simple as that. It was, I think, the 275, a two-seat Ferrari. It's the perfect combination of open Ferrari. I think they are far more advanced than driving a Cal Spider. They're not nearly as beautiful as a Cal Spider. They're less expensive than a 330 GTS or a 365 GTS. Fundamentally the same thing. The other car is rarer, more valuable, a little bit faster. But it all boils down to just missing something that used to be in my garage. And I sold it because it was worth 10 times what I paid for it. And so would I spend 10 times the money? Not really, because I don't have 10 times the money to go buy a car that I owned in '01 for a fraction of. But it all boils down to the memory and the emotion and what was in your garage, and there's no Fangio story, nobody famous drove it, nothing, just me.
Emotion, that's the key thing here. Okay, so let's review our choices. Carl's choices. Well, actually, do you actually want to stick to both choices, or you want to pick the Zagato?
Well,
It's up to you.
you're setting me up, Donald. I again.
Am I? I don't think so.
All right, since you have the Buono, I'll take the Zagato.
Okay, so the 1955 Alfa Romeo 1900 CSS by Zagato, which is a stunning car, amazing color combination. My choice is the Buono, the sort of cross between the Disco Volante and the Bat cars. Jim, the car he cruelly cost his father. And Steve, the one that got away. So, time to vote. By applause for Carl's.
Thank you.
By applause, mine.
6 for 6.
I'll show you all. By applause, Jim's. And by applause, Steve's.
I think we're out, Donald.
I think that the winner is absolutely clear, Jim Pickering.
Well, thank you so much.
Now, Jim, you have to give that to your father, because it's
yes.
not yours.
Okay, I'll do that.
All right, that brings us to the close of our first portion. We've got some time for a few questions, if you have any. Hold on 1 second. Just wait for the mic to come to you, Patrick.
That's not right.
You can, by the way, scratch out Steve's name on the base of that, Jim. You can scratch out Steve's name on the base of that and put Jim Pickering.
So I love the conversation between in sports car market between Jerry Seinfeld and the Collier response back and forth. And really, it's talking about taking a Porsche that's a $525,000 Porsche and driving it as it was found. But the question is, if you're driving that car and you love that experience, really what you're looking for is a time machine that hasn't been restored. Who would want to be in a time machine that had been restored? So the question for you in the panel would be, if you're restoring a car that's original, are you thinking about it before you're doing it in a way that's sensitive to the car's own history?
Okay, you heard that. It was about an article that I certainly didn't read in the sports car market about the 356 Speedster that Jerry brought, I think at the advice of one of his auto advisors here on the panel. So what is your opinion on this? Well, Steve, actually, I'll let you answer last because you actually were in the article. So, Jim.
I had a hard time hearing the question. What was that again?
Oh, the question is, thinking about restoring a car that is largely original, what is the decision process? At what point do you decide to take something which is an artifact and restore it?
I think you have to decide what you want to do with the car. I mean, it is your car. It really comes down to, for me, not so much about value and more about what you want it to be. I would have a hard time cutting up something that was original, I have to say that. But if you're going to take the car to a show, or you're going to take the car out and use it, and its originality is stopping you from doing that, you need to think about what it is you're going to do. I mean, and you know, like I said, I think I would probably leave a mostly original car original, but you know, it really is personal preference.
Carl?
For once, I agree with Jim. I would be very reluctant to take an original car and do anything with it other than getting into good, reliable running order. I mean, it's trite to say, but it's only original once. I mean, you can always take a car that needs everything and restore it, but a good, solid, original car, you know, you hate to see go away.
Steve?
Well, this particular topic has been sort of a hot potato since that article came out with a lot of dinners I've been at. As a little sidebar, the reason why I missed the 275 GTS is because it was an original car. It was in a largely original paint, original interior. The engine had never been torn apart. I bought it with 13,000 miles, drove it to about 35,000 miles. The appeal to me is the beauty of something that's always original. The overused quote from Oscar Wilde, which everybody has heard, is somebody who knows the price of everything,
The value of nothing.
the value of nothing, is a cynic. So with everything we're talking about here, and I'll answer the question directly, I don't think you should touch the original car. I'd leave it There's going to be a certain feel to it. There's going to be a certain drive to it. If it's what you love, it's what you drive. You're never going to get that feeling back out of all those years that were put into that car. Having said that, the argument that the discussion I've been involved with 50 times in the last month, and I think the honest answer is, if you had 3 cars up here that were identical cars, let's use the blue Speedster in the article. If one was completely and utterly restored and it just had $500,000 worth of work done to it, and then there was an original car sitting there, unpainted, original paint, original interior, original engine, never been opened up, with 4,000 miles on it, and then there was a car like the car Seinfeld bought that was used, and it had a life put in it, and it had absolute tens of thousands of miles put on it, and was the rattiest looking but perhaps the best driving of the group. The consensus has always been those 3 cars should be worth exactly the same amount of money. That's what I've discovered in the last month. Everybody has said, who's to decide, other than the person buying it and what their intention is, what the value should be? So if you want to go win prizes, buy the restored car. If you want to collect low mileage cars and not drive them because you're paying for the bragging rights of having something low mileage, fantastic. If you want to drive around in something that is ratty looking, but could be the best driving of all 3 cars, who's to say which one should be more valuable? So to answer your question, I'd personally leave it, and I think having restored a car that was largely original once, I would never do it again.
And I think that we're all saying the same thing. I agree with all of my colleagues, and especially with what Jim said to start, which is value is in use. What I might find valuable in a car, a characteristic, you may not find valuable. And where price and value come into intersect is when more people in the room find a particular aspect, whether it be extreme low mileage, whether it be extreme originality, or extremely fine finishes in a perfectly restored car. What most people want, that's the higher priced car. And that's simply the way the market works.
It's when you open your garage door, are you happy with what's there? Is it going to, if you've had a bad day, is it going to lower your blood pressure? Or if you're looking to do something, is it going to make your adrenaline go crazy when you're driving it? And that's the key to it, I think, with any of this, what the use is going to be. And Donald and I have talked about this at length because we were on different sides of it. And I still think Miles Collier, if he were here, I would say this to him, missed this whole point by a country mile. Miles, in his rebuttal to that article about the Seinfeld cars, said, well, he overpaid for it. Who's to say who overpaid for what? And if you're going to tell a billionaire he's overpaid for something, do you think he cares? If it makes him happy, it makes him happy. So it's as simple as that. It's your money, do what you want with it. And there was an underbidder in the room, so there were 2 people that wanted that. There were actually 4 underbidders on that car, so tough to say.
This value in use. Another question.
Yeah, Steve, you referred to the Franken Porsche. At what point does it become a Franken Porsche? I know the outlaw community, the outlaw faction of the Porsche community has typically been fairly well accepted.
Patrick, do you have a Franken Porsche?
No, I don't. I've had 4 Porsches, and they were all fairly decent.
I think, no, the point about Franken Porsche was, hey, look, I flared the fenders and it didn't come this way. Hey, I put these seats from a different generation in the car. It's really heavily modifying something. And again, if you want to do that to your own car, I'm going to be the last person that's going to judge you for what you're driving. It's going to be an economical thing if you decide to pass that along to somebody else. So Franken Porsche to me means something that even something like a 924 I've seen recently, somebody tried to make it into one of the GTR race cars as a street thing with all this fiberglass hanging off of it. It's like, great. If it made you happy, fantastic. I don't know what you're going to do with it other than drive it into the ground. So if for the purposes of where you're going to put your money and get it out, I could never give anybody advice to go ahead and buy that and reward somebody for what a problem they created. And now it's going to be your problem unless you're the one guy who wanted that polka dot striped suit that, fit the one other guy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that, oh, sorry.
Well, I did want to, But the outlaw, the 356s have been turned into what they call outlaws. Those, those actually do have fairly good value.
That's not, that's not what I'm talking about.
Well,
I mean,
okay.
Great craftsmanship in some of the outlaws where the metalwork is like that you'd find on an airplane, and the leatherwork is great. Think of it as Singer with the 911s they're creating. It's fantastic. I mean, it's great, and so that's not what I'm addressing. Like a beautifully done outlaw, unless of course you put a 911 engine in it with 911 wheels and that whole kind of thing, and it's like,
There is the point that we keep coming actually back to, which is all about value in use. If what you want is a hot rod 356 and you don't want to stretch to the factory's hot rod, the Carrera 2, and you can't, then you can build what it is that suits your needs. When you go to sell it, don't expect the rest of the market to reward your work. Because you put $200,000 into your personal build does not mean your car is worth $200,000 to anyone else.
and that's
Another
an ugly
question, not about Porsches. Yes, just kidding.
Having heard what Carl said about Ford GTs, I'm just curious what the panel thinks might happen to Ford GT prices and to Acura NSX first generation prices once the new NSX comes out this year and the new GT comes out.
An excellent question, Alex. What will happen to the prices of the Ford GT and the Acura NSX when their new models come out? Jim?
Well, the GT is different enough, I think, the 05 and the 06 GT from the new one, that I don't think we're going to see much drop in value. I mean, the new one does not have the V8. It's not going to have the same sound. It has a fantastic sound, but it's not the same. So I think it's easy to say that you think that maybe it'll go down a little bit, but my guess is that it's going to stay pretty solid. I mean, we've seen that over the last couple of years already anyway.
Carl?
I would think it's going to have a slight adverse effect to it, not a great deal, but I think it almost has to. I mean, here's another of the same, if you will, a newer version of yesterday's car.
Well, I think with my dealer's hat, my day job hat on, you're comparing apples and fish because there were so many NSXs made, and the GT as it came out originally was sort of built as a limited run collectible thing, and it proved that. I think the GTs will go up. I think it'll be so hard to get one of the new gen cars, it may bump the price of the old ones. And the NSXs, I can't speak to it, I mean, because I just don't, there are too many of them in the marketplace. I think when Jim was talking about different generation guys collecting cars, that's a poster car, and all of a sudden people have started to ask for them and look for them and try to find one. Try to find a great one that has, I don't know, even 40 or 50,000 miles on it. It's tough. It's a tough thing to find, so it may get bumped a little bit.
In my opinion, the new GT, I'll just speak to the Ford GT for the moment, the new Ford GT will not affect positively the prices of the older Ford GT, but I think that the new Ford GT will be a very collectible car because Ford intends to race it. And cars that are actually used in competition have a much greater value in appreciation going forward. So I think that, and if Honda decides to actually campaign the new NSX, I think that will make a big difference there. I don't think it'll make a big difference for the older models.
You had mentioned that the Ford GTs, you don't see them really appreciating much, the 05s and 6s. One of the other cars that I'm interested in is the Z8. And just wondering what your thought on the Z8 is, as we've seen a little bit of appreciation over the last few years in a limited edition vehicle. And are there any other in the last 15, 20 years that you may see as that type of potential where there's a limited amount of production and has a good upside? Thanks.
Steve, what have you got in stock that, oh, sorry.
The Z8's interesting because it's a worldwide car. It's an interesting car because not everything transcends continents, and the Z8 does. The car has gone up a lot in the last 18, 24 months. It doesn't seem to be hiccuping down a little bit. It seems to be very solid. If you love driving the Z8, you can buy an M5, which is a Z8 with a roof, for a lot less money. I mean, you gotta find one, another one that's the low mileage. I think they're great cars. I think people are rabid about how they view them in terms of their originality and mileage, and they're so mileage conscious on the price. I mean, there's such a difference between a 1,000-mile car, a 5,000-mile car, and a 10,000-mile car. If you're going to drive it, buy the 20,000-mile car, because it's going to be a fraction of the price of the lower mileage one. And don't worry about if you get the hardtop cradle, the book that came with it, the keys, all that stuff. Buy one in silver with a black interior, and if the purpose is to drive it and enjoy it, buy the most common one and do it. If you're looking at it as a long-term thing, just look at the marketplace on the oddball colored cars with the rarer interiors, and the prices are just staggering for what people will want, because they can. It's like buying, to me, it was like buying an old Corvette. Well, I got the radio delete in mine, which is why it's worth more. And you can just keep splitting these hairs down to, well, which one did you like to drive? So, does that help?
Steve also brought up something which we touched on but didn't really actually address, which is in terms of attributes of value, in terms of what is most interesting and most enduring in collector cars, is international appeal. You just mentioned the fact that the Z8 is a world car. A car that is very, very popular in France, a Venturi GT, is a really interesting car, but no one will give you a nickel for one here. However, there are cars like 300 SLs that have a global market. Certain Corvettes, very, very particular Corvettes, a split window coupe has a global market. An L88, which is a spectacular car, has less of a global market than a split window coupe, because it's not sort of as iconic American as people feel. So I think that's another issue as well.
Well, it was the Z8 was the top technology at the time from BMW. It was marketed around the world as well, where the Venturi was not sold in the United States. Nobody knows about it. And if you go to the UK and you talk cars with people, they know nothing in a great many circles of American cars. And for a country that is so fascinated, and it's, again, fabric of their society, the automotive world, there's no buzz about American cars. But you get something like a Z8 or a 300 SL or a Ferrari Dino, pick one, that was marketed around the world, and they're valuable around the world.
And even a Ford Mustang, you can get a huge price in Europe for a Mustang that no one would give you, $10,000 for here. Carl? You seem to be about to say something.
No.
Oh, okay. Another question? Yes, sir.
Well, we talked about this a little earlier, but I'd like to ask again. On your restoration, what do you do with an older car that's a high mileage, and I'll refer again to the Porsche, maybe a Corvette or whatever, that's been abused? You're not going to be able to enjoy it. The brakes aren't going to work. You're going to have electrical problems. The motor's going to be high mileage. How do you take one of these cars without mechanically restoring it and drive it and enjoy it?
Well, the question is, you have a car with high mileage whose components need to be renewed in order to actually use it. And to me, I think that is the exact point that you have to make the decision about whether you're going to restore anything. Cars are meant, as far as I'm concerned, I think as my fellow panelists will agree, to be used. Now, everybody uses their cars and enjoys them in a different way. There are people that like to trailer their cars and not drive them and take them to shows, and that's fine. There are people that want to run at least 10,000 miles a year in a car, whether it be in rallies or tours or whatever. And so in order to do that, the car has to be able to do it. And I think that was one of the points of the Seinfeld Speedster as well, the fact that he found that the car was eminently drivable, so therefore, why do you need to do anything else to it?
Well, I think it's a dollars and cents thing, as well as something that you may find relaxing or you may find rewarding. I don't think you should restore anything that you could spend thousands of hours doing that's worth X, and you can pick the X point. Maybe it's $200,000, where you might be able to find a similar thing by just looking for one. If your own personal car is worn out and you were married in it and it's been in the family 50 years, and you get this great joy of bringing this life back into it, then have at it. But if you get a legal pad and you write out, this is going to cost me X dollars, and it's going to cost X hours, and it's going to take it may take a shop, maybe 5 years before you get the car back, 4 years. I mean, great shops for certain cars, you can't even get into them to have cars restored, and then it's going to take so long. I think that's the thing. You have to figure out, economically, does this make sense? Can I find another one a lot quicker, a lot faster? If you've got a one-of-a-kind like that Alpha that Donald pointed out that he loves, if you want that car restored, you have to restore that car. There isn't another one to find. If you're talking about a 1965 Mustang Coupe automatic small block, why would you bother? Just go find another one. Find one that somebody's blown their brains out on, or find a nice original one.
But I think with collector cars, we take so much better care of them than we do with our everyday car. I mean, you look at a car with a 15-year-old restoration, and you really have to sometimes dig deeply to see where the imperfections are. Where you take my 15-year-old everyday car, the imperfections are very obvious. So I think you can go much further with a higher mileage collector car before you get to the point where you have to do anything with it, other than the care that you're already giving it.
Jim?
Well, to me, it goes back to value and use. I mean, cars wear out. It happens. And I don't think there's anything wrong with renewing the mechanicals and leaving all of the cosmetics alone. I think you'll still have a lot of the same feel that the car had originally, but it'll still drive and do what you want it to do. And I think that, personally, that's the way I would want a car. I like the evidence of the passage of time, and I think that would be something that drove a little bit better than it might if you didn't touch the mechanicals would be the way to do it.
Absolutely. Another question? Yes, sir.
Yes, I want to know what your opinions are regarding the recent price escalation and future as well on the Ferrari 550 Maranello.
Ferrari 550 Maranello.
I didn't hear the first half.
About the price appreciation in the 550 Maranello.
I'm just beating the dead horse here. It's a modern supercar. They like Carl said, it was on a depreciation curve as a modern car. It got to a point where people looked around and went, oh my God, these are $75,000. Why wouldn't I want to buy one of these instead of, and the world woke up to them being inexpensive, not inexpensive to service, not inexpensive to own by any right, but they were a value, and a combination of them depreciating to a point where they were unloved in the marketplace. Collectively, 200 people around the world went, I want one of those. And they immediately doubled in price in a very short period of time. I think if you were lucky enough to have purchased one 3 years ago, you got the deal of a lifetime. People compare that to the Aston Vanquish. I think the Maranello is a more usable, easier to maintain car. It's frankly, isn't built any better. I think there are some components on it that last better. The Aston is the counterpoint to the Maranello. The market really hasn't moved yet on those cars, and I think they still may be a bargain in the long run compared to like that 250 GTE we talked about earlier. Well, you can buy 2 or 3 Maranellos for the price of that GTE, and if you want a driving experience, great car to own.
Steve also alluded to a conversation that we had in a dinner we went to last night, and I think, Steve, this is another example of people looking for a usable modern car with character rather than buying a brand new X. They'll say, I can get a 550 Maranello. These are going to be my running costs, so I can add that to the price, and it's still less than the $300,000 I might spend on a new Y, and it gives me so much more character in my experience.
Well, the 612 Scaglietti was the same thing. It was largely unloved because it was very expensive and it had 4 seats. And we service Ferraris in my shop as well as Astons and Lotus cars, and we're seeing a great number of those because they've bottomed out value-wise, where very savvy guys have said, why wouldn't I want to own this? It was $350,000. I can buy one for 80, 90, 100, 110 grand now, and they come in and they drive the wheels off of them. It's a very curious demographic for that car. They're drivers' cars where they were kind of sold as a usable Ferrari when new, but much like the Maranello, the 612 is caught on kind of like that, and they're cool cars to drive as a modern car for X, for 100 grand.
We have thoroughly and completely retitled this seminar, Value in Use. Carl.
Well, I think an analogy is the Testarossa. They were a hot car. Then they went down the depreciation curve, and they were selling for what, $50,000, $60,000, and then they hit the collectible curve, and then they went back up, and they're now, what, 150, 160. So I think that's an analogy to what you were talking about.
Yes, sir.
For the example where a manufacturer modified a limited number of cars, an example might be what Donald Healey did to 3000s, creating a 3000 coupe. I think he made 2 or 3 of them. And then someone subsequently comes along and takes a 3000 and replicates that. What is the upside value of a car like that?
The question is a limited production car, which is then replicated, I presume, as accurately and correctly as possible. What would be the upside value of that?
I don't think there is one. To be honest with you, I mean, I think if you find value in it by using it, great, but it would be like buying a brand new, expensive car. I mean, if you're referring to Cobras specifically, or whatever, the continuation cars, they're no less fun to drive than the real thing, but they're not going to be worth more than what you paid for it. And it's kind of like buying a great Beck Spider, which is a replica of the 550 Spider. $35,000. Those cars have been $20,000 to $35,000 for 20 years, and they give you a great amount of fun. It's great value for money, but upside, I personally, none.
But I think they're often limited production for a reason. Nobody bought them. And so if that's the case, you can, you're still, what are you restoring? You're still restoring something that's not really very desirable.
There would have been hundreds of people that really wanted a really, really, really hot Healey inside.
Much
Steve,
like the Camzen.
The Aston Martin DB4 GT Sanction 2 cars, they sort of are semi-official cars, and they sell for more than a standard car, but certainly not what the original run sold for.
Yeah, it's a curious exercise in marketing and bullshit, frankly.
Which has never happened before in the history of automobiles, by the way.
Victor Gauntlet at the time, God rest his soul, discovered, along with Richard Williams, that there was a series of missing chassis numbers that were unused in the original run of DB4 GT Zagatos, for those people that don't know the story. And I happened to wander into Richard's shop in 1987 and saw these cut-down DB4 chassis that were becoming the Sanction 2 Zagatos. I'm 99% sure they started with 4 real DB4s, and they brought back these chassis numbers, sold them as a continuation car built 27 years after the fact. And Aston got away with it because of the time, because Victor Gauntlet was a very savvy marketing man, and they had Zagato working with them as well, building the bodies. So, I mean, that's a little bit of the anomaly. I still don't buy into it. I mean, a DB4 GT Zagato was built in the early 60s. They made 19 of them. They're worth $12 to $15 million. The Sanction 2 cars, there were originally 4. I think they're probably trading hands now at $4 or $5 million, where they sold originally for $600,000, if my brain's working right. And then the insult is they actually made a Sanction 3 and a Sanction 4. So if you had enough money, you could go to the factory and just pay them off and be blessed with this continuation car. The Sanction 2 cars drive a lot like the original cars, and they're worth more than what they were at the time. But I personally, as an Aston guy since 1980, I never bought into that. I just thought it was a great marketing thing, and apparently a lot of other people bought into it.
So the answer to your question is sometimes, maybe, but not usually.
Yeah.
Good morning. Bringing it into maybe a more of an entry-level type car, I've seen dramatic rise in early 70s BMW, specifically 3.0, 2002 TIIs, turbos. What do you think is driving that? Is it just the familiarity of a lot of people? It's reachable and all that. Where do you see that going? I don't typically see those brought up as the collectibles, as what the hotties, the not going anywhere and all that. Where do you see that market going?
I'm just going to take a second to say that actually Steve and I addressed a bit of that in our picks about the Franken Porsches and the Abnormales. One of the challenges in the BMW collectible market is the fact that BMW enthusiasts love to modify their cars. And so therefore it's been very difficult to see them in a broader collector spectrum because people are looking for original cars.
Well, you touched on something I know a little bit about. I've owned 13 2002s, and I think they're the greatest little econo boxes on the planet. I think people love them, and they're appreciating and value primarily because they're built really well, they have a ton of character, and you're hitting a generation of guys that remember those cars from their youth. It is very difficult, and it has been very difficult, finding a great 3.0 over the years because the minute they left the factory, they started to rust. They weren't as built as robustly as the 2002. The 2002 saved the company. It was the first successful car. I mean, you go back to what David E. Davis talked about in the early days, the mid days of road and track. It was an iconic car. Finding a great one, talk about a complete range. If you want to get some great humor, go on to Bring a Trailer and look at the last few 2002s that have sold. You have a huge base of people that can't believe their cars are worth this much money, and you have to be out of your mind spending $20,000 or $30,000. I bought mine for $500. Why are these worth so much? These people are losing their minds. Try to find, and it took me 7 years on the last good one I looked for, a great 2002 TII 72 to 73 in a specific color that's bone stock. And the last one I had, I can say, I had the car and I finally got tired of driving them. I finally had to purge my garage of things that I've owned forever. You have $47,000 for a 60,000 mile original paint TII. You can buy a 2002 for $7,500 as a big bumper at 75 or 76, end up with kind of 60% of the same car, and so there's your range. I think the disparity is a great one versus a common one, and they've caught on with it. Just a generation of guys that went, I remember those. My boss drove one, and I couldn't afford it when I was sweeping the floor of whatever. They're very cool cars. They're broad base. Again, they're Europeans love them. South Africans love them. The 2002 clubs everywhere. 3.0, tougher car to find as well in good condition.
Jim?
I think Steve nailed it. I think it's a shifting interest in the market, and I think it's people going after the cars that they knew and that they want to have back. And, the market's always changing. There's always interests that are moving around, and it's just part of the way it works.
Carl? Well, the interesting thing that Steve said about when they were new, when I was in college, I had doesn't matter what I had at the time, but I bought a 1975 Scirocco, brand new, and I had a neighbor who was a BMW dealer who said, oh, why don't you borrow this 2002 TII for the weekend, see if you like it. He knew that, oh my God, he's got to buy this car. But I didn't because it cost $4,250. And the difference between the $3,500 for the Scirocco and the $4,250 for the TII was substantial. Now, obviously, they bring slightly different prices in the collector market today, but I think that that's the whole point, is that people are looking for originality, and there's a huge range, and you have to make sure that you're buying the car that suits the need you're looking to fill. One last question.
Hi there. Porsche 911s are everywhere this week at the auctions. Where do you see the market going for the early ones through the 1980s?
We can go back to my slide that shows going nowhere fast, but Carl.
I didn't hear the question again.
Oh, sorry. The question is that there are Porsche 911s all over Arizona this week. And indeed, frankly, in the last 3 auction cycles, if there weren't 911s and Jaguar E-Types, the tents would be much emptier. But where do we see prices going on the early 911s?
Well, I think, as I've said before, I think the prices on Porsches in general are driven by a very active club that gives you something to do with it, to do with the car. And I think that carries with the 356s and the 911s also. So I think as long as there's an active group supporting the cars, supporting the club, supporting the people, I think they will continue to appreciate.
Well, I think what do you define as early? Because I think the early 901s try to find one. The There's a great many collectors looking for one. If you can't afford an early car and you're looking at a 65, I still think the market's moving on them. And again, it goes down to each and every specific car. An original paint car is going to be worth a ton of money to Porsche guys versus one that's been repainted. I think the market for marginal cars has completely flattened and gone down, and not everything is being driven up. And I think at the very top of the Porsche early 911 food chain, you're still going to have appreciation. You're still going to have people chasing the cars, creating the appreciation. I think a lot of guys bought these cars in the last 5 years and went, I'm going to keep this car now forever because I love driving it. And a lot of the need has gone away. I think there are only so many people buying so many of these cars, and the breather in the marketplace that I personally see is because things have just flattened out, because there aren't, if you look around and you see the same faces over and over and over and over again at the auctions, there are only so many guys that get this, so many families that get it. And until a new generation of people come up and decide what they want to chase, I think everything's going to be flat for a little while, with the exception of the great examples of anything.
Okay, and thank you very much. I want to thank our sponsors, Santangelo Group at Merrill Lynch, Chubb Insurance, and of course our host, Gooding & Company, our panelists, and the staff at Sports Car Market for making this possible. And everyone, enjoy yourselves this week, and don't spend more money than you want to. Thanks.